The knife gleamed in the afternoon sun for just a heartbeat before it plunged toward the child, and Fiona Everett did not think, did not hesitate, just threw herself between the blade and the boy who could not have been more than 7 years old. The pain came sharp and white-hot, splitting through her left side like lightning through summer sky, and she gasped as her knees buckled beneath her. The ground of Nevada, Missouri rose up fast, dust coating her lips as she hit hard, her vision swimming with dark spots that threatened to pull her under. She heard shouting, the thunder of boots on packed earth, and somewhere in the chaos the sound of a child crying. Good, she thought through the haze of agony. He was alive. That was all that mattered. It was September of 1882, and Fiona had only arrived in Nevada 3 weeks prior. Stepping off the train with a carpet bag containing everything she owned and a heart determined to start fresh after her father's death had left her with nothing but debts in St. Louis. The town was smaller than she had imagined, nestled in the western Missouri prairie with its handful of streets and weathered buildings. But it had promised work at the general store and a room above the millinery shop. She had thought she would be safe here, anonymous, just another young woman of 22, trying to make her way in a world that did not often favor her kind. She had not expected to die in the street on a Tuesday afternoon, bleeding out in the dirt while trying to save a stranger's child from a drunk man's rage. "Jesus Christ," a voice said above her, rough and low, edged with something that might have been alarm. "Someone get Doc Harrison, now." Strong hands rolled her onto her back, and Fiona cried out as the movement sent fresh waves of agony through her side. She blinked hard, trying to focus on the face above her. A man, broad-shouldered and sun-weathered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with the kind of face that looked like it had seen too much too soon. "Easy now," he said, his hands already moving to her side, pressing something against the wound. The pressure made her whimper, and his jaw tightened. "I know it hurts, but I need to stop the bleeding." "The boy," Fiona managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Is he safe?" The man's expression shifted, something like surprise flickering across his features. "He's fine, not a scratch on him. You took the knife meant for him." "Good," she breathed and let her eyes fall closed. "Hey, no, stay with me." His voice sharpened, and she felt his hand against her cheek, surprisingly gentle despite the calluses she could feel against her skin. "Keep your eyes open. What's your name?" "Fiona," she said. "Fiona Everett." "Owen Maddox," he replied. "And you're going to be all right, Fiona Everett. You hear me? You're going to be just fine." She wanted to believe him, but the darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, thick and seductive, promising an end to the pain that was tearing through her with every breath. She heard more voices, felt herself being lifted, and then there was nothing but the black. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, the scent of antiseptic and leather, the creak of a bed beneath her, pain, still present but duller now, like a fire that had burned itself down to coals. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the amber light of oil lamps, and found herself in a small, sparse room she did not recognize. "You're awake." The voice was the same one from before, Owen Maddox, and she turned her head carefully to find him sitting in a chair beside the bed, his forearms resting on his knees, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. There was blood on his shirt, she noted distantly. Her blood. "Where am I?" Her throat was dry, the words scraping out. "My place," he said, rising to pour water from a pitcher into a tin cup. He slipped a hand behind her head, helping her lift enough to drink, his touch careful. "Doc Harrison was 3 towns over, tending to a breech birth. Couldn't wait for him to get back. You were bleeding too much." Fiona swallowed the water gratefully, then frowned as his words sank in. "What do you mean, could not wait?" Owen set the cup aside and settled back into his chair, his gray eyes holding hers steadily. "I mean, I stitched you up myself. I've done it before, plenty of times. Horses, cattle, men after bar fights, and worse. Never on a woman who threw herself in front of a knife to save a kid she did not even know. But the principle's the same." She stared at him, trying to process this information. "You stitched me." "Cleaned the wound first, then stitched it. 14 stitches. It's going to scar, but you'll live." He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. "You're braver than most." The words settled between them. simple but weighted with a sincerity that made Fiona's chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the knife wound. She looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "I just did what anyone would do," she said. "No," Owen replied, his voice quiet but firm. "You did what most people would like to think they'd do. There's a difference. I've seen grown men freeze when violence comes calling. You didn't hesitate." Fiona did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. After a moment, she asked, "What happened to the man? The one with the knife?" "Arrested. Sheriff Dawson has him locked up. He'll face the judge next week." Owen's jaw tightened. "Henry Crawford. He's been drinking himself mean for months now, since his wife left him. Today he decided his brother was to blame, went after him in the street. The boy got between them, and Crawford lost what little sense he had left." "The boy was his nephew?" "Yeah. Thomas Crawford. He's staying with his aunt now. She wanted to come see you, thank you herself, but I told her to wait until you were stronger." Fiona nodded slightly, then winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. Owen was on his feet immediately, his hand hovering near her shoulder, as though unsure whether to touch her. "Don't move too much," he said. "You'll tear the stitches. Just rest." "How long was I unconscious?" "About 6 hours. It's past midnight now." 6 hours. Fiona closed her eyes briefly, exhaustion pulling at her, despite the sleep she had apparently already gotten. "I should get back to my room. Mrs. Hadley will worry." "Already sent word to her. She knows you're here and that you're safe." Owen hesitated, then added, "You need to stay still for at least a few days. Let the wound start to heal. You're welcome to stay here. I've got the space." Fiona's eyes snapped open. "I cannot stay here. You are an unmarried man, I assume, and I am an unmarried woman. The talk alone would ruin what little reputation I have." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Owen's expression. "You're worried about your reputation after you threw yourself on a knife in the middle of Main Street? I think that ship's already sailed, Miss Everett." "That is different," she protested, though even as she said it, she could hear the weakness in her own argument. "How about this?" Owen said, his tone softening. "You stay here tonight because you're in no condition to be moved, and frankly, I'm not sure I trust anyone else to watch over you. Tomorrow, if you're strong enough, we'll figure out something else. Mrs. Hadley or one of the other women in town can stay with you if you're that concerned about propriety. Deal?" Fiona wanted to argue further, but the truth was she could barely keep her eyes open, and the thought of trying to walk anywhere made her entire body ache in protest. "All right," she conceded quietly. "Thank you." Owen nodded, settling back into his chair. "Try to sleep. I'll be right here if you need anything." "You do not have to stay," Fiona said, though part of her was grateful he was offering. The room was strange, the situation frightening, and having someone nearby was a comfort she had not expected. "I know I do not have to," Owen replied, "but I'm going to anyway." Fiona looked at him for a long moment. This stranger who had saved her life, who had stitched her wound with his own hands and was now watching over her like she was something precious. She did not understand it, did not understand him, but she was too tired to puzzle it out now. She let her eyes fall closed and drifted back into sleep. The next morning brought fresh pain and an awareness of just how much trouble she was in. Fiona woke to find Owen gone from the chair, though she could hear movement elsewhere in the house, the clatter of pans and the smell of coffee brewing. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, gasping as her side screamed in protest. "I told you not to move," Owen said, appearing in the doorway with a steaming mug in his hand. He set it on the small table beside the bed and moved to help her, sliding an arm behind her back to ease her up against the pillows he stacked at her back. His touch was impersonal but careful, and Fiona found herself acutely aware of how close he was, the warmth of him, the faint scent of soap and leather and horses. "Thank you," she murmured as he stepped back, and he nodded, handing her the coffee. "How's the pain?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face, as though looking for signs of distress. "Manageable," Fiona lied, and from the way his eyebrow lifted, he knew it. "I've got laudanum if you need it. Doc Harrison keeps me stocked since I'm out on the range so much." "What do you do?" Fiona asked, grateful for the distraction as she sipped the coffee. It was strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. "I run cattle," Owen said. "Got a spread about 5 miles west of town. Not as big as some of the operations in Texas or Wyoming, but it's mine. I come into Nevada for supplies and to check on my sister." "You have a sister here?" Mary, she's 19, works at the schoolhouse as a teacher. Our parents died when she was young, and I've been looking after her ever since. He said it matter-of-factly, but Fiona heard the weight beneath the words, the responsibility he had carried for years. That must have been difficult, she said softly. Owen shrugged. You do what you have to do. Family's family. He studied her for a moment, then asked, What about you? What brought you to Nevada? Fiona hesitated, then decided there was no point in being evasive. I needed a fresh start. My father died 6 months ago and left me with more debts than assets. I sold what I could, paid what I could, and left St. Louis before the rest of the creditors came calling. I heard there was work here at the general store, so I came. No other family? No, my mother died when I was 16. I was all my father had, and he was all I had. She paused, then added, Until he was not. Owen nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. I'm sorry. So am I, Fiona said. She took another sip of coffee, then asked, How did you learn to stitch wounds? That seems an unusual skill for a cattleman. Learned from my father, mostly. He was a doctor, back before he came west. Gave it up to raise cattle. Said he was tired of watching people die from things he could not fix. But he taught me the basics, how to clean a wound, how to set a bone, how to stitch skin. Figured it would be useful out here, and he was right. Owen's expression grew distant. He saved a lot of lives, my father, including mine, more than once. He sounds like a good man, Fiona said. He was. Owen cleared his throat as though shaking off old memories and straightened. I should let you rest. I've got some things to take care of in town, but Mrs. Hadley's on her way over to sit with you. I figured that would make you feel better about the arrangement. You did not have to do that, Fiona protested, though she was relieved. I know, but I did anyway. He moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back at her. You need anything before I go? Fiona shook her head. I am fine. Thank you, Owen. He nodded and left, and Fiona was alone with her thoughts and the dull throb of pain in her side. Mrs. Hadley arrived 20 minutes later, a brisk woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She bustled into the room with a basket over one arm and immediately set about making Fiona more comfortable, fluffing pillows and adjusting blankets and generally fussing in a way that was both annoying and oddly comforting. You gave us all quite a scare yesterday, Mrs. Hadley said, settling into the chair Owen had vacated. The whole town's talking about what you did. Henry Crawford could have killed that boy if you had not stepped in. I just reacted, Fiona said. I did not really think about it. That's what makes it brave, dear. Thinking about it would have given you time to be afraid. Mrs. Hadley pulled some knitting from her basket and began to work, her needles clicking softly. Owen Maddox is a good man, taking you in like this. Not many would have. He said he had no choice. The doctor was not available. Oh, he had a choice, Mrs. Hadley said, her tone knowing. He could have left you at the boarding house and hoped for the best, or taken you to his sister's place. But he brought you here, to his own home, and stayed up all night watching over you to make sure you did not take a fever. That's not obligation, dear. That's something else. Fiona frowned, unsure what to make of that. He barely knows me? Sometimes that does not matter, Mrs. Hadley said cryptically, and would say no more on the subject. The days that followed settled into a strange routine. Owen would leave early each morning to tend to his cattle, and Mrs. Hadley or one of the other women from town would come to sit with Fiona, bringing food and gossip and companionship. Owen would return in the late afternoon, often with wildflowers he claimed he had just happened to see on his way back, and would check her wound with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior. The stitches were holding well, he reported each time, and there was no sign of infection. Fiona found herself looking forward to his returns more than she cared to admit. There was something about Owen Maddox that drew her, something beyond gratitude for saving her life. He was quiet but not withdrawn, thoughtful in a way that suggested he listened more than he spoke. When he did talk, it was about his cattle, his sister, the land he loved with a fierce, abiding passion that reminded Fiona of how her father had once spoken about medicine before the drink had taken him. On the fourth day, Fiona insisted on getting out of bed, and Owen helped her to the chair by the window, his arm steady around her waist as she shuffled the few steps. The movement exhausted her, but it felt good to be upright, to see the world beyond the four walls of the bedroom. You are healing well, Owen observed, crouching beside the chair to check the bandage at her side. His fingers were careful as they peeled back the fabric, his touch clinical but somehow intimate in its attentiveness. "Another week, and I can take the stitches out." "A week?" Fiona repeated, dismayed. "I cannot stay here for another week, Owen. I have already imposed too much." "You have not imposed at all," Owen said firmly, his eyes meeting hers. "And you are not going anywhere until you are healed enough that I am not worried you will tear the stitches and bleed out in your sleep." "I have a job," Fiona protested. "Mr. Henderson at the general store will not hold my position forever. Already talked to him. He knows what happened, and he is holding your job. In fact, half the town wants to give you a medal for what you did." Owen's expression softened. "You are a hero, Fiona. Act like it." Fiona looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. "I am not a hero. I just did what was right." "That is what heroes do," Owen said quietly. He stood, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder, and then moved to the stove to start preparing dinner. That evening, after Mrs. Hadley had left and the sun had set beyond the western horizon, Fiona found herself sitting at Owen's small kitchen table, picking at the stew he had made while he sat across from her, drinking coffee and watching her with those steady gray eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Fiona said finally, setting down her spoon. "Of course. Why are you doing this? Taking care of me, I mean. You do not owe me anything." Owen was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. When he spoke, his voice was low and honest in a way that made Fiona's heart skip. "Because when I saw you lying in that street, bleeding and barely conscious, and you asked if the boy was safe before you asked about yourself, I knew you were someone worth saving. And then when I was stitching you up, seeing how deep that knife had gone, knowing you had taken that blow meant for a child you did not even know, I thought about how rare that kind of courage is, how rare you are." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I guess I wanted to make sure someone who would do that got a chance to keep living, to keep being that person." Fiona's throat tightened, emotion welling up in a way she had not expected. "I do not feel brave," she admitted. "I feel terrified most of the time, of failing, of ending up like my father, of being alone." "Being brave does not mean you are not scared," Owen said. "It means you do the right thing, even when you are." They held each other's gaze across the table, and something shifted between them, some unspoken understanding that went beyond gratitude or circumstance. Fiona felt it in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stew or the fire in the stove, and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Owen nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You are welcome." The week passed more quickly than Fiona had anticipated. Each day brought more strength, more mobility, until she could move around the small house without needing Owen's arm to steady her. She began to help with small tasks, peeling vegetables for dinner or folding the laundry despite Owen's protests that she should be resting. It felt good to be useful again, to contribute something after days of being cared for. Owen's sister Mary came to visit on the 6th day, a bright-eyed young woman with dark hair like her brother's and a smile that lit up the room. She embraced Fiona carefully, mindful of the injury, and declared that anyone who would save a child deserved all the kindness the world could offer. "Owen has not stopped talking about you," Mary said with a mischievous glance at her brother, who scowled and muttered something about checking on the horses. Fiona felt her cheeks warm. "He has been very kind," she said carefully. "He has been smitten," Mary corrected, her eyes dancing. "I have not seen him like this since, well, ever, actually. He is usually so focused on the ranch and taking care of me that he barely notices when women try to catch his attention. But you, he notices?" "Mary," Fiona said, flustered, "I am sure you are reading too much into it. He is just a good man doing the right thing." "Maybe," Mary conceded, "but I know my brother, and I know what I see when he looks at you." Fiona did not know what to say to that, so she changed the subject, asking Mary about the schoolhouse and her students. They spent a pleasant hour talking, and by the time Mary left, Fiona felt like she had made a friend. That night, Owen removed the stitches. Fiona sat on the edge of the bed, her dress unbuttoned enough to expose the wound, while Owen worked with steady hands and a small pair of scissors. It stung, but not unbearably, and she watched his face as he concentrated, noting the small furrow between his brows, the way his jaw tightened when he was being especially careful. "There," he said finally, sitting back. "All done. It's healing clean. You were lucky." "Thanks to you," Fiona said. She looked down at the scar, a thin pink line along her ribs, and traced it lightly with her fingers. "I suppose I will have this forever." "Battle scars," Owen said, his voice soft. "Proof that you fought and won." Fiona smiled faintly. "I like that." She looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were, how his hand was still resting near her side, how she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. "Owen, Fiona," he said at the same time, and they both stopped, a laugh escaping them both at the awkwardness. "You first," Fiona said. Owen took a breath, his expression turning serious. "I know you will be going back to your room soon, back to your job and your life, and that is good. It is what should happen. But I want you to know that these past 10 days, having you here, they have meant something to me. You mean something to me. And I would like, if you are willing, to keep seeing you, to court you properly, the way you deserve." Fiona's heart hammered in her chest, hope and fear warring within her. "Owen, I do not have anything to offer you. No money, no family, no prospects beyond a job at a general store." "I do not care about any of that," Owen said, his hand moving to cover hers where it rested on her lap. His palm was warm and calloused and steady. "I care about you, about who you are, and I think if you give us a chance, we could have something good, something real." Fiona looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope, and she knew her answer. "I would like that," she said quietly. "I would like that very much." Owen's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds, sudden and bright and warm. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent a shiver through her. "Then we will take it slow, do it right. I will come calling, bring you flowers, take you to church socials, all the things a proper courtship should have." "I look forward to it," Fiona said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. 2 days later, Fiona moved back to her room above the millinery shop, though she did so with reluctance. Owen's house had become a haven, a place where she felt safe and cared for, and leaving it felt like leaving home. But propriety demanded it, and so she gathered her few belongings and let Owen drive her back into town in his wagon, Mrs. Hadley accompanying them to preserve appearances. True to his word, Owen began courting her. He came calling every Sunday after church, dressed in his best shirt and trousers, his hair combed back, and his manner as courteous as any gentleman's. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, their colors vivid against the gray of the town. He took her to socials at the church hall, where they danced stiffly at first, both of them aware of the eyes watching them, but gradually with more ease as the weeks went by. Fiona returned to work at the general store, and Mr. Henderson welcomed her back with genuine warmth, even giving her a small raise in acknowledgement of what she had done. The townspeople treated her differently now, with respect and admiration that still made her uncomfortable. Mothers stopped her on the street to thank her, and more than one person tried to give her money, which she always refused. Thomas Crawford, the boy she had saved, visited her at the store one afternoon with his aunt. He was a solemn child with big brown eyes, and he handed her a drawing he had made, a crayon picture of a woman with yellow hair standing between a stick figure boy and a man with a knife. "Thank you for saving me," Thomas said quietly, and Fiona knelt down, despite the pull of her healing scar, to hug him. "You are very welcome," she said. "You be good for your aunt, all right." He nodded solemnly and left with his aunt, and Fiona tucked the drawing into her apron pocket, a reminder of why the scar she bore was worth it. As autumn deepened into winter, Fiona and Owen's courtship deepened as well. They spent hours talking, learning each other's stories, their hopes and fears and dreams. Owen told her about his parents, how his father had given up medicine to follow his dream of ranching, how his mother had supported him, even when it meant leaving everything familiar behind. He spoke of the responsibility he felt for Mary, the promise he had made to his parents to look after her. Fiona told him about her childhood in St. Louis, about her mother's gentle kindness and her father's slow descent into alcoholism after her death. She spoke of the shame she had felt, watching him drink himself into oblivion, the helplessness of being unable to save him. She told Owen things she had never told anyone, and he listened without judgment, holding her hand and offering comfort without trying to fix what could not be fixed. "You did not fail him," Owen said one cold November evening as they sat together in the parlor of the boarding house, Mrs. Hadley discreetly knitting in the corner to act as chaperone. "You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. I know that in my head," Fiona said, "but my heart still feels like I should have done more." "That is because you have a good heart," Owen replied, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "But you cannot carry guilt for someone else's choices. Your father made his decisions. You made yours. And your choice to come here, to start fresh, that was brave." "I ran away," Fiona said. "You survived," Owen corrected. "There is a difference." Fiona leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her carefully, always mindful of her scar, even though it had long since healed. They sat like that until Mrs. Hadley cleared her throat meaningfully, and Owen reluctantly pulled away. "I should go," he said, "early morning tomorrow." "Will I see you Sunday?" Fiona asked. "You will see me Sunday," Owen promised, and kissed her forehead before leaving. Christmas came, and with it the first real snow of the season. The town of Nevada transformed into something almost magical. The weathered buildings softened by white, the air crisp and clean. Owen gave Fiona a shawl he had bought in Kansas City, deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. Fiona gave him a new hat, a Stetson she had saved for weeks to afford, and the look on his face when he opened it made every penny worth it. They attended Christmas Eve service together, and afterward stood outside the church in the falling snow, their breath misting in the cold air. "Fiona," Owen said, taking her hands in his, "I know we have only been courting for a few months, and I know the proper thing would be to wait longer, to give you more time. But I have never been much for doing things the way everyone else thinks they should be done." Fiona's heart began to race. "Owen, what are you saying?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "I am saying I love you. I have loved you since the moment I saw you lying in that street, asking if a stranger's child was safe. I love your courage and your kindness and your stubborn determination to do the right thing, even when it costs you. I love the way you laugh and the way you think and the way you make me want to be a better man. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will have me. Fiona Everett, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Fiona's cheeks, hot against the cold air, and she nodded, words failing her for a moment. Then she found her voice, shaky but sure. "Yes. Yes, Owen, I will marry you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, his lips cold and then warm, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. Around them, people were leaving the church, exclaiming at the snow and calling out Christmas greetings. But Fiona heard none of it. There was only Owen, only this moment, only the overwhelming certainty that she had found where she belonged. They were married in February of 1883, in the same church where Owen had proposed. Mary stood up as Fiona's attendant, and Owen's foreman, a weathered man named Cow, served as his best man. The ceremony was simple, attended by half the town, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers could be heard clear across Main Street. Fiona moved to the ranch after the wedding, and it felt like coming home in a way that nowhere else ever had. The house was small but sturdy, built by Owen's father with his own hands, and Fiona immediately began to make it theirs. She sewed curtains for the windows and planted a garden in the spring, coaxing vegetables and flowers from the prairie soil with patient determination. Owen taught her to ride, laughing at her initial awkwardness, but patient as she learned. They would ride out together in the early mornings, watching the sun rise over the endless grassland, and Fiona thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. This land was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also magnificent, and she understood why Owen loved it so fiercely. Their first year of marriage was not without its challenges. A late spring blizzard killed a dozen head of cattle, and Fiona held Owen while he grieved the loss of animals he had raised from calves. A summer drought threatened the grass, and they prayed for rain that came just in time to save the herd. Fiona learned to stretch $1 further than she had thought possible, to cook meals for the ranch hands during branding season, to mend fences and tend sick cattle and do whatever needed doing. But there were joys too, small and large. The first time Owen told her he loved her in the bright light of day, not just in the intimacy of night. The way he would come in from working the herd and seek her out first thing, as though assuring himself she was still there. The evenings spent on the porch, watching the sunset while Owen played a battered harmonica his father had given him. In September, on the anniversary of the day Fiona had been stabbed, they rode into town together. Owen had something he wanted to show her, he said, and he led her to a spot near the general store, where a small monument had been erected. It was simple, just a carved stone, but the words made Fiona's throat tight. In honor of Fiona Maddox, who on this day in 1882 risked her life to save a child. True courage is not the absence of fear, but action in the face of it. The town commissioned it, Owen said quietly, his arm around her waist. They wanted to make sure no one forgot what you did. Fiona leaned against him, overwhelmed. I do not need a monument. Maybe not, Owen agreed, but you deserve one anyway. That winter, Fiona discovered she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening in January, as they sat by the fire, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. For a moment he just stared at her, and then he was pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. A baby, he kept saying. We are going to have a baby. You are happy? Fiona asked, though she could see that he was. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Owen said, kissing her thoroughly. You have given me everything, Fiona, everything. The pregnancy was not easy. Fiona was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down, and Owen fussed over her like a mother hen. He brought her ginger tea and crackers, held her hair when she was ill, and worried constantly despite her assurances that this was normal. As her belly grew, so did Owen's protectiveness. He would not let her lift anything heavy, would not let her ride horseback, or help with the more strenuous chores. It drove Fiona mad at first, his constant hovering, but she knew it came from love, and so she tolerated it with as much grace as she could muster. Mary visited often, bringing books and gossip and companionship. She was engaged now herself to a young banker named Thomas Wright, and the wedding was planned for June. Fiona was glad for her friend, glad to see her so happy. Do you ever think about that day? Mary asked one warm April afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas. The day you saved Thomas Crawford? Sometimes, Fiona admitted, usually when my scar aches because the weather is changing. Owen thinks about it all the time, Mary said. He told me once that he believes God put you in that place at that moment for a reason. To save Thomas, yes, but also so that Owen would meet you. He said you are the best thing that ever happened to him. Fiona felt tears prick her eyes, hormones making her more emotional than usual. He is the best thing that ever happened to me, too. I am glad, Mary said simply. You are good for each other. Anyone can see that. The baby came in late August of 1884, after a long and difficult labor that terrified Owen more than it did Fiona. Doc Harrison attended the birth, and when he finally placed the squalling infant in Fiona's arms, Owen knelt beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. A son, Doc Harrison announced. A healthy baby boy. They named him James, after Owen's father, and he had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair. Owen was utterly besotted, spending hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. Fiona would wake in the night to find Owen already up, pacing the room with James against his shoulder, murmuring to him about cattle and horses and the land that would someday be his. You are going to spoil him, Fiona said one morning, watching as Owen cooed at James. Absolutely, Owen agreed without shame. That is what fathers do. Fiona laughed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, and Owen was able to hire more hands to expand the herd. Fiona ran the household with capable efficiency, raising James and tending to the endless tasks that came with being a rancher's wife. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in St. Louis, but it was satisfying in a way her old life had never been. James grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, his small legs pumping to keep up with Owen's long stride. Owen taught him about the animals, how to be gentle with them, how to respect the land that sustained them. Fiona taught him his letters and numbers, read to him from the books Mary brought, sang him the songs her mother had once sung to her. In 1886, their daughter was born. They named her Rose, and she was as different from James as night from day. Where he was all restless energy, she was calm and observant. Where he was loud, she was quiet. Owen loved her with the same fierce devotion he showed James, and Fiona often found him sitting with Rose in his lap, talking to her about everything and nothing while she gazed up at him with solemn eyes. "Our family," Owen said one evening, as they stood together watching James and Rose play in the yard. James was 4 now, Rose just 2, and they were chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Everything I ever wanted and did not know to ask for." Fiona leaned into him, his arms solid and warm around her shoulders. "Everything I never dared to dream of," she replied. Mary married Thomas Wright in a ceremony that was the social event of the season. Fiona stood up as her matron of honor, James as a somewhat distracted ring-bearer, and the celebration lasted long into the night. Mary and Thomas settled in Nevada, and Mary continued teaching while Thomas worked at the bank. They had their first child, a daughter, in 1887, and the two families grew even closer. Life was not without its sorrows. Cal, Owen's foreman and friend, died in 1888 when his horse spooked and threw him, breaking his neck. Owen grieved deeply, and Fiona held him through the worst of it, just as he had once held her. They hired a new foreman, but Owen still spoke of Cal often, keeping his memory alive. There were hard years, too. A prairie fire in 1889 came within a mile of the ranch house before the wind shifted and saved them. A harsh winter in 1891 tested them all, and they lost cattle despite their best efforts. But they survived together, their bond strengthening with each challenge they faced. In 1892, Fiona discovered she was pregnant again. She was 32 now, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous 2 had been. Owen worried constantly, and even Fiona had to admit she was more tired this time, more worn down by the demands of carrying a child while managing a household and 2 active children. But in March of 1893, their second son was born. They named him Daniel, and he was a perfect, healthy baby who seemed determined to make up for the difficult pregnancy by being the easiest of their 3 children. "Our family is complete," Fiona said one night as she nursed Daniel while Owen got James and Rose ready for bed. She could hear them in the next room, James protesting that he was not tired, Rose giggling at something her father said, and her heart swelled with love. "Complete and perfect," Owen agreed, coming to sit beside her. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that, watching Daniel nurse, listening to their older children settle into sleep, wrapped in the peace of their small, precious world. The town of Nevada grew and changed over the years. New families arrived, drawn by the railroad and the promise of land and opportunity. The general store expanded, and new shops opened along Main Street. Thomas Crawford, the boy Fiona had saved, grew into a fine young man who went off to college in Kansas City to study law. He visited sometimes, and he always made a point of thanking Fiona again for what she had done. "You gave me a life," he said during one visit in 1895. "Everything I am, everything I will be, is because of you." "You would have been all those things anyway," Fiona said. "I just made sure you got the chance." "That is everything," Thomas replied. In 1896, James turned 12 and began to take a more active role in the ranch work. He had his father's love for the land and a natural way with the animals. Owen taught him everything, patient and thorough, and Fiona watched with pride as her son grew into a capable, confident young man. Rose, at 10, had discovered a love of books that rivaled her Aunt Mary's. She spent hours reading everything she could get her hands on, and she talked of becoming a teacher like Mary. Owen encouraged her, ordering books from back east, making sure she had access to education. Daniel, at 3, was the family's joy, a happy child who seemed to find wonder in everything. He trailed after his older siblings, trying to keep up, and they were patient with him in a way that made Fiona grateful for the family they had built. On a warm evening in September of 1897, 15 years to the day after Fiona had been stabbed, the family gathered on the porch after supper. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, and the prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful. "Tell us the story again," Daniel demanded, climbing into Fiona's lap. "About how Mama saved the boy and Papa fixed her." Owen and Fiona exchanged a glance, and Owen smiled. "You have heard this story 100 times," he said. "I want to hear it 100 more," Daniel insisted. So Owen told the story again, as he had so many times before. He told it simply, without embellishment, but Fiona heard the emotion beneath his words, the memory of that day still vivid after all these years. And that is how your mama and I met, Owen finished, because she was brave enough to save a stranger, and I was lucky enough to be there to help her. You saved each other, James observed, wise beyond his 12 years. Yes, Owen said, reaching over to take Fiona's hand. I suppose we did. Later, after the children were in bed, Owen and Fiona sat together on the porch swing, rocking gently in the cool evening air. They did not talk, did not need to. After 15 years of marriage, they had learned the comfort of silence, of simply being together. Do you ever regret it? Owen asked finally. Giving up your life in town to live out here? Fiona looked at him, surprised. Never, not even once. This is my life, Owen. You, the children, this land. This is where I belong. I love you, Owen said, the words as sincere as the first time he had said them. More than I can ever say. I love you too, Fiona replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. Thank you for saving my life that day. Thank you for living it, Owen said, for choosing me, for building this life with me, for being exactly who you are. They sat together as the stars emerged overhead, the vast prairie sky arching above them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the cattle lowed softly. The wind rustled through the grass with a sound like whispered secrets, and Fiona breathed it all in, this life she had built from the ashes of her old one. She thought about that day 15 years ago, the knife and the blood and the pain. She thought about the moment Owen had said she was braver than most, and how those words had changed everything. She had not felt brave then, had not felt like anything except terrified and in agony. But Owen had seen something in her that she had not seen in herself, and he had made her believe it, and in believing it, she had become it. What are you thinking about? Owen asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Everything, Fiona said, and nothing, just how grateful I am for that day, as terrible as it was, because it brought me here, to you. Owen pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I am grateful too, every single day. They stayed like that until the night grew deep and the chill drove them inside, to the house they had made a home, to the bed they shared, to the life they had built together. And as Fiona drifted off to sleep in Owen's arms, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she thought that this was happiness. This was everything she had never known to want, everything she had never dared to hope for. A knife wound had brought them together, but love had bound them, and it was love that would carry them forward into whatever years remained. Love and courage and the steadfast certainty that they had found in each other something rare and precious and worth fighting for. The scar on her side had long since faded to a thin white line, barely visible, but Fiona touched it sometimes, remembering the pain, yes, but more than that, remembering what had come after, the kindness of a stranger who had become her husband, the family they had built, the life they had made, battle scars, Owen had called them once, proof that she had fought and won, and she had. She had won everything. The years continued to unfold with the rhythm of ranch life. Seasons turned, bringing their work and their weather. Springs meant calving, long nights spent checking the herd for cows in distress. Summers meant branding and moving cattle to better grass. Autumns meant preparing for winter, laying in supplies and fixing what needed fixing before the cold came. Winters meant hunkering down, keeping the animals fed and the fires burning, and waiting for the thaw. Through it all, Owen and Fiona moved as partners, each supporting the other. When Owen worried about the ranch, about cattle prices or drought or disease, Fiona was there to listen and advise and remind him of all they had weathered before. When Fiona struggled with the demands of motherhood or the isolation of ranch life, Owen was there to hold her and help her and make sure she knew she was not alone. In 1899, James at 15 announced his intention to stay on the ranch, to learn everything he could from his father so that someday he could take over. Owen's pride was evident, but he made sure James understood the weight of the responsibility. This land will take everything you have to give, Owen told his son one evening as they mended a fence together. It will test you and challenge you, and sometimes it will break your heart. But if you love it, if you truly commit to it, it will give you a life worth living. Like it did for you and Mama, James asked. Exactly like that, Owen said. Rose, at 13, had become a voracious reader and a talented writer. She filled journals with her observations and stories, and Mary encouraged her to consider going to college, to pursue teaching, or even writing as a career. Fiona supported this dream, even though it meant Rose might leave the ranch someday. "Let her fly," Owen said, when Fiona confessed her worry that Rose would leave and never come back. "We raised her to be strong and independent. We have to trust that we also raised her to know where home is." Daniel, at 6, was showing signs of being a natural horseman. He could sit a saddle as steady as boys twice his age, and he had a way with the animals that reminded Fiona of Owen. He was also affectionate in a way his older siblings had never been, always ready with a hug or a kiss, and Fiona cherished it. In the spring of 1900, Mary's husband Thomas died suddenly of a heart ailment. The loss devastated Mary, and Fiona spent weeks helping her through the worst of the grief, taking over care of Mary's 3 children while Mary struggled to function. Owen gave Mary time and space and practical help, managing the financial affairs Thomas had left behind, making sure Mary and the children were provided for. "I do not know what I would do without you both," Mary said one afternoon, as she and Fiona sat together in the garden. "You have been my anchor." "You were Owen's anchor when your parents died," Fiona replied. "Family takes care of family. That is what we do." Mary reached over and squeezed Fiona's hand. "I am glad you are my family." "So am I," Fiona said. As the new century dawned, change came to the west. The open range was giving way to fenced land, the days of the great cattle drives fading into memory. Railroads crisscrossed the prairie now, and towns like Nevada were growing into small cities. Owen adapted as he had always adapted, fencing his land and improving his stock, attending cattlemen's associations and learning new methods. "The world is changing," he said to Fiona one night. "I just hope there is still a place in it for men like me." "There will always be a place for men like you," Fiona assured him. "Men who work hard and care about the land and do the right thing. That does not go out of style." In 1902, James turned 18, and Owen officially made him a partner in the ranch. They shook hands on it like businessmen, but then Owen pulled his son into a fierce embrace. "I am proud of you," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "More proud than I can say." "I learned from the best," James replied. Rose left for college that same year, heading to a teacher's college in Kansas City. The house felt emptier without her, and Fiona cried the night after they put her on the train. But Owen held her and reminded her that Rose was following her dreams, and that was what they had always wanted for their children. Daniel, at 9, took Rose's absence hard. The two had been close despite the age gap, and he moped around the house for weeks until James took him in hand and started teaching him roping and other ranch skills. The distraction helped, and soon Daniel was back to his cheerful self. In 1904, at the age of 44, Fiona discovered she was pregnant again. The news shocked them both. Their children were grown or nearly so, and they had assumed their family was complete. But Doc Harrison confirmed it, and so they prepared to welcome another child. "We are going to be starting over," Fiona said, half laughing, half despairing. "I will be changing diapers when I am 45. "And I will be chasing after a toddler when I am 50, Owen replied. "But we will manage. We always do." The pregnancy was difficult, as Fiona had known it would be. Her body was older, more worn from years of hard work and previous pregnancies. She was tired all the time, and the baby sat heavy on her, making even simple tasks exhausting. Owen hired a woman from town to come help with the housework, and he took over many of Fiona's usual duties himself. In December of 1904, their 3rd son was born. They named him Samuel, and he was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and Fiona's blue eyes. Daniel was enchanted with his new baby brother, and James showed a gentleness that surprised Fiona. "He is perfect," Rose said when she came home for Christmas. She held Samuel carefully, marveling at his tiny features. "Our surprise blessing." "That he is," Owen agreed. The years that followed were a return to the early days of their marriage in some ways. Late-night feedings and diaper changes, the exhaustion of caring for an infant while managing everything else. But there were differences too. They had experience now, knew what to expect, and they had help. James and Daniel took on more of the ranch work, freeing Owen to help Fiona. Rose came home during her breaks from college and threw herself into caring for Samuel, giving Fiona much-needed rest. In 1906, Rose graduated from college with honors and returned to Nevada to teach at the schoolhouse where Mary had once taught. Mary had retired after Thomas's death, content to focus on her own children and grandchildren. Rose moved back into the ranch house, and having her there made everything easier. Samuel grew into a bright, curious child who seemed to have inherited all the best traits of his siblings. He had James's love of the land, Rose's intelligence and curiosity, and Daniel's affection and charm. Owen doted on him shamelessly, and Fiona often caught her husband playing with Samuel on the floor, the two of them lost in whatever game they had invented. "You are spoiling him," Fiona said, though she was smiling. "I am enjoying him," Owen corrected. "I was so busy trying to keep the ranch going when James and Rose were small. And then with Daniel, I was older, but still working so hard. But now, with Samuel, I can slow down a bit. Let James carry more of the load. I can actually enjoy my son while he is small." Fiona understood. She felt it too, this sense that Samuel was a gift they had not expected, a chance to savor the small moments they had rushed through before. In 1908, James married a young woman named Catherine, the daughter of a rancher from the next county over. The wedding was held at the ranch, and half the county turned out to celebrate. James and Catherine built a small house on the eastern edge of the ranch property, close enough to help, but far enough to have their own space. They welcomed their first child, a son they named Owen, in 1909. "I am a grandfather," Owen said wonderingly, holding his grandson for the first time. "How did I get old enough to be a grandfather?" "By living a good life," Fiona replied, watching him with their grandson. "By building something worth passing on." Daniel, at 15, was beginning to show interest in the horses more than the cattle. He talked of raising horses, breeding them, and training them, and Owen encouraged this. There was room on the ranch for both cattle and horses, and Daniel had a gift that should not be wasted. Rose met a young lawyer from Kansas City named Franklin Hayes when he came to Nevada on business. They began corresponding and then courting, and in 1910 they were married. Rose moved to Kansas City, and Fiona cried again, though she was happy for her daughter. "She has to live her own life," Owen reminded Fiona. "We raised her to be strong enough to do that." "I know," Fiona said, "but I can still miss her." Samuel, at 5, started school, and the house felt even emptier. Fiona found herself at loose ends for the first time in decades. Her children were grown, or in school. The ranch ran smoothly with James and Daniel and Owen managing it, and she was left wondering what her purpose was now. Owen found her crying in the kitchen one afternoon and pulled her into his arms. "What is this about?" he asked gently. "I do not know what to do with myself anymore," Fiona confessed. "Everyone is grown. They do not need me like they used to." "I need you," Owen said firmly. "I have always needed you, and you know what? It is okay to take time for yourself now, to do things you enjoy just because you enjoy them. You have earned that." So Fiona began to do just that. She took up painting, something she had always wanted to try. She joined the church ladies' auxiliary and helped organize socials and charity drives. She read voraciously, all the books she had never had time for when the children were small. And she spent time with Owen, just the two of them, in a way they had not been able to for years. They would ride out together, just to ride, not to check fences or move cattle, but simply to be together on the land they loved. They would sit on the porch in the evenings and talk about everything and nothing. They made love with the unhurried pleasure of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. "I like this," Fiona said one evening. "Just us. I love our children, and I would not trade the life we have built for anything. But this is nice too." "It is," Owen agreed. "We are not done living yet, Fiona Maddox. We have a lot of years left, and I intend to enjoy every one of them with you." In 1912, Daniel married a spirited young woman named Julia, and they began their horse breeding operation in earnest. Rose and Franklin had their first child, a daughter they named Fiona. The letters and photographs Rose sent filled Fiona with joy, even though she wished she could see her daughter and granddaughter more often. Samuel, at 8, was thriving in school and showing signs of the same scholarly bent Rose had displayed. He talked of becoming a doctor, inspired by stories of Owen's father, and Owen encouraged him, knowing the world needed good doctors. The years passed, marked by births and deaths, joys and sorrows. Mary died in 1915, and Owen grieved deeply for the sister he had raised. They buried her next to Thomas, and Owen made sure her children were provided for, just as he had promised he always would. James and Catherine had 3 more children, and Daniel and Julia had 2. The ranch was filled with grandchildren, and Owen and Fiona reveled in it. They were older now, their hair gray and their faces lined, but they were still strong, still active, still deeply in love. In 1920, Samuel left for medical school in Chicago. He was 18 now, a serious young man with Owen's steady nature and Fiona's compassion. Owen helped him pack, offering advice and encouragement. "Make us proud," Owen said. "I will do my best," Samuel promised. After he left, Owen and Fiona stood together in the yard, watching the dust settle from the wagon that had taken Samuel to the train station. "Our last child, grown and gone," Fiona said. "Not gone," Owen corrected. "Just living his life. But yes, it is strange, is it not? The house is so quiet now." They went inside together to the house that had been their home for nearly 40 years. It was quiet, yes, but it was also peaceful. They had built a good life here, raised good children, created something that would last beyond them. That evening, they sat on the porch as they had so many times before. Fiona thought about the girl she had been, frightened and alone, stepping off the train in Nevada all those years ago. She thought about the knife and the blood and the pain, about Owen's steady hands and his quiet assurance that she would be all right. She thought about the scar she still bore, faded now, but still there. A reminder of the moment her life had changed forever. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Fiona asked, "after you stitched me up." "I said a lot of things that day," Owen replied. "You said I was braver than most," Fiona said, "and I did not believe you then. I thought you were just being kind." "And now?" Owen asked. "Now I know you were right," Fiona said. "Not just about that day, but about everything that came after. Building this life, raising our children, weathering all the storms, all of it took courage, and I did it because you believed I could." Owen reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong after all these years. "We did it together," he said. "That is what made it possible." They sat together in the gathering dusk, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of ways and built something beautiful. Around them, the prairie stretched out, endless and eternal, the land they had tended and loved and passed on to the next generation. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, capturing decades of memories, weddings and births, birthdays and holidays, the whole sprawling story of their family. And at the center of it all, Owen and Fiona, their love, the foundation on which everything else had been built. "I would do it all again," Fiona said softly. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy, all of it." "So would I," Owen said. "With you, I would do it all again." They stayed on the porch until the stars emerged, the vast Missouri sky arching overhead. And then they went inside, to the bed they had shared for nearly 40 years, to sleep wrapped in each other's arms as they always had. The years continued to pass, each one a gift. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed great-grandchildren. Samuel became a doctor, just as he had dreamed, and opened a practice in Nevada, returning to the town where he had been born. Rose wrote novels, drawing on her experiences growing up on the prairie, and her books were published to modest success. James ran the ranch with the same dedication Owen had shown, and Daniel's horses became sought after throughout the region. Owen and Fiona grew older, their bodies slowing, but their minds still sharp, their love still strong. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1933, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the house bursting with laughter and life. 50 years, Owen said that night as they lay in bed. "Half a century with you, and it still is not enough." "We have been blessed," Fiona replied, "more than I ever imagined possible." In the fall of 1935, Owen fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and by winter he was struggling to breathe. Samuel diagnosed pneumonia and did everything he could, but Owen was 79 years old, and his body was worn out from a lifetime of hard work. Fiona barely left his side, holding his hand and talking to him about their life together. She reminded him of the day they met, of their courtship and wedding, of all the moments big and small that had made up their years together. "I love you," she told him over and over. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you to the end." Owen smiled at her, his gray eyes still clear despite the illness ravaging his body. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," he said, his voice weak. "You and the life we built. I have no regrets, Fiona. None." He died on a cold January morning in 1936, with Fiona holding his hand and their children gathered around. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the prairie he had loved so much. Fiona stood at his grave long after everyone else had left, staring at the simple headstone. Owen Maddox, 1856, 1936. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, a man who lived with courage and loved with his whole heart. You saved my life that day, Fiona said softly, and then you gave me a life worth living. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything. She lived another 10 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1946 at the age of 86. They buried her beside Owen, and the entire town turned out for the funeral. She was remembered as a hero, as the woman who had saved a child at great cost to herself. But more than that, she was remembered as a good woman who had lived a good life. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations. James's son Owen took it over when James retired, and then Owen's son after him. The Maddox name became synonymous with honest ranching and fair dealing, a legacy that Owen and Fiona had built together. And on a hill overlooking the prairie, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and built a love that had lasted a lifetime and beyond. The scar had faded, the pain had passed, but the love, the courage, the life they had built together remained, woven into the fabric of the land and the family they had created. It was a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, proof that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best lives, and that true love, once found, never dies. It simply changes form, becoming memory and legacy, and the stories we tell to remind ourselves that bravery and love are not just words, but choices we make every day. And in making those choices, we create the lives we are meant to live. Fiona Everett had stepped between a knife and a child, and in doing so had stepped into a life beyond her imagining. Owen Maddox had stitched her wound and told her she was braver than most, and in doing so had found the love of his life. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone, and that, in the end, was everything.